Top boxing news.
I don't necessarily agree that we should be fighting 12 3-minute rounds. I think they have made it 10-2s for a reason. And like the WBC said, the women's tennis and the men's tennis, they have different times. The women's basketball and the men's basketball, it's a different size hoop and this and that. There's all these different things. Like, men and women are not the same. And just because you want to fight 12 3-minute rounds, that's not fighting for equality or whatever it is. In my opinion, men and women are different, and there's a reason why, and there's science behind why it is 10-2s. If it changes, I think 10-3s. I think 10-3s.
The good people at No Smoke Sport very recently sat down with unbeaten up-and-comer from Australia, Skye Nicholson, ahead of her fight this weekend with Sabrina Perez. And she's not for the 3-minute round. Doesn't see the point.
This accents what I told you before. Not every female fighter is a proponent of 12 3-minute rounds. Some like things the way that they are.
Some of them may be asking themselves, what's the benefit here? What is the virtue of adding more time to the round and more rounds to the fight? A fighter like Skye Nicholson.
I think it boils down to styles. I think it boils down to a fighter's individual preferences. As a fighter like Skye,
a pure boxer that's more finesse than ferocity. She doesn't go in there looking for a knockout anyway, so adding more time to the round in order to give her more time to score a knockout,
that's not her aim.
She's not a knockout merchant. She knows she isn't, and she doesn't try to be. So she may be content with things as they are. Whereas a more heavy-handed puncher, a knockout puncher, knockout merchant, like an Amanda Serrano,
she wants that extra time.
I have heard a good number of fighters like Amanda say that if they would have had a little bit more time in the round, they might have been able to knock out some of their opponents, score more knockouts, and the virtue of that is knockouts are marketable.
They are.
Casuals love knockouts.
The 2-minute round likely frustrates knockout merchants and heavy-handed punchers the most because they don't have a lot of time to score a knockout. They don't have a lot of rounds.
Whereas a pure boxer, or really any boxer, that is more finesse than ferocity. They don't necessarily go into the fight looking for a knockout. They likely prefer the 2-minute round. They can do the business, and before you know it, they've won the rounds and the fight is over. Tack on that they're not getting any extra money for fighting for more time.
That too.
You don't get paid by the minute, and you don't get paid by the round. So if there's no additional money attached, what's the point?
If Skye Nicholson is successful this weekend opposite the ring Sabrina Perez, and she becomes WBC interim champion, she's made it known she's going to pursue a fight with Amanda.
She means to enforce her status in that scenario as WBC interim champion to force the fight with Amanda Serrano. I have nothing against Skye, but it's not a fight that I think she's ready for, whether it's 10 2-minute rounds or 12 3-minute rounds. Myself,
I wouldn't mind seeing 12 2-minute rounds. I remember it was former unified champion Kaylee Reese who made that suggestion. Instead of 10 3-minute rounds or 12 3-minute rounds, what about 12 2-minute rounds?
The virtue of a 2-minute round is the fast and furious pace that it sets, that neither fighter has any time to waste. No time to pussyfoot around and feel each other out.
No lulls in the action.
Barely any lulls in the action. You can argue that because the round is only 2 minutes, you're only going to produce but so many knockouts, though at the same time, the action within the round is fast-paced, and that's entertaining.
I like 2-minute rounds personally.
You know, Skye Nicholson has every intention of forcing a fight with Amanda Serrano beyond this weekend's fight. And whether it's 10 2-minute rounds or 12 3-minute rounds, stylistically,
physically,
I don't think she's ready for it. The sheer number of unbeaten up-and-comers that have proliferated in the women's featherweight division. You're talking about unbeaten Sarah Liegman, unbeaten Sophia Leach, unbeaten Raven Chapman, unbeaten Karis Ardingstall,
unbeaten Ebony Jones.
And there are more. They haven't put pressure on themselves the way that Skye has. attaching her name to an established fighter, the most established fighter at this weight, Amanda Serrano, which really isn't necessary because it's still very early in Skye's career, but it's her ambition.
And I won't begrudge her ambition.
Even if I think it's ill-advised. Stylistically and physically, I don't think she's got it to beat Amanda Serrano. If the plan is to stay on the outside on your bike, she's gonna catch up to you eventually.
More experience with a better engine and more power. She will break Skye Nicholson down.
Now, maybe in Skye Nicholson's own mind, she views Amanda as a limited fighter, a limited puncher.
That's what she thinks.
She figures between her height and her length, those long levers, and staying on her bike, she can coast to a points decision against Amanda, who comparatively does have heavier feet than Skye, but she's got other things working for her.
A lot of other things.
It's just something to think about beyond this upcoming Friday's fight. Men's welterweight news, some comments from that division's reigning undisputed champion, two-time undisputed champion Terence Crawford stated, My, how the tables have turned. Danny Garcia, you and Keith Thurman will never, and I mean never, get a shot at the top dog, and that's me. Y'all hoe asses didn't want no smoke when I wanted to fight, remember? Now y'all want to fight so bad. Go keep fighting each other, like before.
My previous video, we talked about Danny Garcia's recent comments about how a Crawford fight is still a possibility.
According to Danny, it is. According to Terence, it isn't. Terence has stated, it's funny how all these fighters want to fight now, but back then, all they could say was, I haven't fought nobody. Now, they're begging, looking for a check. You can't make this up.
It's true. They froze him out before. We've talked about it here on the channel a million times.
Though perhaps Danny Garcia isn't as hard-pressed for a Terence Crawford fight as Terence Crawford thinks. Danny responded to Terence's comments by saying, I'm rich, bro. I don't need to fight you. I've been making millions. Plus, I ain't trying to pay all those sanctioning fees. I can use some of that money to buy some more real estate.
It's a PBC response if I ever heard one.
What Danny is saying in so many words is that he's not hard-pressed to fight Terence Crawford. That's what he's saying, and in truth, I don't think he's ever wanted to fight Terence Crawford. I don't think he wanted to fight him years ago. I don't think he really wants to fight him now.
I don't.
He may have entertained that possibility in a recent sit-down interview with Marcos Villegas, but he's not serious.
He's not serious about fighting Terence. He's just talking.
Danny's response to Terence, that he doesn't need to fight Terence because he's already made millions. Well, so is Terence. In fact, he made more money than Danny did to fight two of the same guys that Danny fought.
Terence is a millionaire.
What's the point in Danny Garcia telling Terence Crawford about his millions when Terence has got millions of his own? Perhaps more than Danny. What's the point in Danny telling Terence that he's into real estate when so is Terence? Terence is into real estate.
They're developing a property over there in Omaha, Nebraska. A gymnasium, both Terence Crawford and Bo Mack.
Let me put it to you another way. What I've often seen PBC fighters do, when it comes to fights that they really don't want to have, is they'll use business as a deflection, a distraction. What Danny is saying in so many words is he doesn't need to fight Terence because he already has money. Well, Terence has got money too.
You're a fighter, aren't you?
Isn't that short trade? Isn't that what you do? You're a fighter.
Barely.
The real reason that Danny Garcia has always had an aversion to facing Terence Crawford, whether we're talking about years ago or years later, here and now, is because he knows he won't win.
He'll lose.
He knows it. Underneath it all, everybody knows it, that if you put Danny Garcia in the ring with Terence Crawford, irrespective of how Terence Crawford feels about it, Terence doesn't just beat him, he annihilates him, he stops him. Danny Garcia is not of the same ilk as Terence Crawford. The silver lining for Danny is he doesn't want to fight him anyway.
He's never wanted to fight him.
Perhaps Keith Thurman is more hard-pressed to land a Terence Crawford fight than Danny Garcia, because Danny's never wanted to fight Terence Crawford, and he still doesn't.
Not really.
All these fighters that were claiming to be their own bosses were hiding behind the term, call Al. Now they're talking like they can fight whoever they want. Both y'all some pawns. Go sit down, said Terence Crawford to Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman. Y'all created a whole term. He's on the wrong side of the street. When in boxing, have you ever heard some shit like that till I moved up?
Never, to be honest.
It was in September of 2018 when Errol Spence Jr. stood on a podium and coined the phrase,
He started that.
your side of the street, my side of the street. He coined the phrase.
Errol did.
And the Haymanites, they ran with it in their fashion, the way they often do. For the simple fact that Errol said it, they ran with it. They're more focused on who a guy is than what?
Than what a guy is saying.
Terence continued, did me dirty. Had all these people that don't know anything about boxing all trying to discredit my accomplishments. He hasn't fought anybody. Lies. But not one wanted to be that so-called somebody. Not Danny Garcia.
Not Keith Thurman either. This was the tune Keith Thurman was singing in those days.
I have no interest in the Crawford fight. It does not interest me.
In those days, PBC fighters were almost gloating that they weren't fighting Terence Crawford, holding that against him whilst questioning his resume, simultaneously saying that he hasn't fought anybody, but not wanting to fight him.
How's he supposed to fight the somebodies if none of the somebodies want to fight him?
They say the cream always rises to the top, and it looks like I'm the last man standing. I know y'all mad about it, but it's not my plan. This is God's plan. I told you before. I told you immediately after the Errol Spence Jr. fight that the PBC brand took a big hit when Terence Crawford went in there and dominated their star fighter.
Their brand took a hit.
And now all their fighters are feeling it. Their star welterweights, what were their star welterweights, like Danny Garcia, like Keith Thurman, that maybe you guys were never that good to begin with. And the real reason you didn't fight Terence before is because you knew what would happen. What happened to Errol would have happened to you if you would have fought him.
Now you want to come with your hand out looking for an opportunity?
Now that Terence has effectively exposed what was supposed to be the PBC's prized stallion at 147, now you guys are expecting Terence to do you favors.
Fuck yeah.
Go back to what you were doing before. Go back to playing musical chairs, sitting in a circle jerk with each other, and fight each other.
It's the problem for those guys. There's not much money in them fighting each other. Their stock is at an all-time low. Not just Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman as well. He's a quasi-retired fighter. I don't know what he's sticking around for.
The entire conversation is neither here nor there because Errol Spence Jr. has reportedly activated his rematch clause. Thus, Terence isn't at liberty to fight either Danny or Keith anyway.
Not right now.
There are some holding it against Terence Crawford that he will not give these fighters the time of day. Now, Danny doesn't seem that hard-pressed to land a Terence Crawford fight. He never has. But Keith
is in his tits about it, and he responded to Terence.
Two things about you talking about me, bud, okay? There's two things. Thing number one, the year that they wanted me to fight you was the year that I was supposed to fight Pacquiao, and everybody knew why I didn't fight you.
It is true. The first time out, it was in the same year. But why is it that PBC fighters always treat situations like this like they're either-or situations, like it's either you fight Terence or you fight Manny, when if you actually like your chances against Terence, you go, you fight him, you do what you've got to do, then you fight Manny afterwards.
It's not an either-or situation. It's not like you couldn't have fought them both.
The real reason Keith treated it like it was an either-or situation was because if he would have fought Terence, he wouldn't have made it to Manny.
Remember what I told you, that these guys negotiate from a position of weakness, a position of fear?
Okay. Now, after the Barrios fight, I was all ready to fight you. You're the one who just doesn't want somebody to have a tune-up, shake off the dust, keep these...
What Keith is essentially saying there is that after the Mario Barrios tune-up fight, he was ready to fight Terence Crawford, which I don't believe, because that Mario Barrios fight, that was a WBC eliminator of some kind, intended to put Keith Thurman in the ring with the WBC champion, who was Errol Spence Jr. at the time. And you expect me to believe that you were going to fight Terence instead of Errol.
It's full of shit.
What Keith was doing was waiting to fight Errol at the most opportune time. He was in limbo. He was on standby.
And it backfired.
It backfired because if it was your plan to get Errol in the ring, should things not work out between him and Terence, well, you never got him in the ring. And all that time,
you lost it.
Your plan didn't work.
After the Barrios fight, I was all ready to fight you. You're the one who just doesn't want somebody to have a tune-up, shake off the dust, keep everything moving. You a stay busy fighter, kid. What do you got? 40 wins? I got 10 less fights than you, homie. We come from the same Olympic year, bro.
Says that with conviction. He says that like it's a good thing. That you guys more or less come from the same cycle of amateurs, but he has 10 more fights than you do. So it's not a coincidence that he is a 3-division, 3-time lineal, 3-time Ring Magazine, 2-time undisputed champion.
And your claim to fame is you beat Danny Garcia in 2017.
Let's get it straight. Keith Thurman never beat a champion to be a champion when it came to the WBA title. He was elevated to that position. When it comes to the WBC, he beat Danny Garcia for it in 2017.
And that's the highlight of Keith Thurman's resume, the Danny Garcia fight. Danny, who has no solid victories, no solid wins as a welterweight.
Keith Thurman brings up Terrence's stay busy fights. The fact that Terrence has 10 more fights than Keith does, he brings that up like it's a bad thing.
Well, how has all that inactivity worked out for you, Keith? Because you look like a guy who's ready to cash out, but nobody's giving you the time of day.
I could have fought you any day of the week after February last year, bro. We could have fought in July, August, September, October, period. And you did fight in October.
And you didn't. The problem for Keith was they had him on the shelf as a contingency should things not work out between Terence and Errol, and they didn't. And Keith thought he'd get his crack at the apple with Errol.
Errol shunned him.
Errol didn't want to give him the time of day. That's how that worked out. Errol decided that he would rather gamble with Terence Crawford than give Keith Thurman an opportunity.
Tough break, Keith.
Now it seems that Keith is receptive to a Crawford fight, i.e. he's ready to cash out and make a few bucks before he bows out from the sport, but Terence won't give him the time of day.
You did fight in October. You fought some nobody that we didn't care about, bro.
And he made an estimated $10 million in doing so. What did you make last year, Keith? What did fighting Mario Barrios once? What did fighting him get you?
The schedule of activity, rather the schedule of inactivity that Keith Thurman's been on. Tell me, what's the upside? How has he benefited from that? How has that helped his situation?
So, look, man, I'm not mad at him, you know.
It was former champion Yordanis Ugas who caught wind of these comments from Keith Thurman and stated, "I was training to fight Thurman, and I don't know what happened. A change came. The guy has fought once in 4 years. I have seen him giving more interviews than fighting. I hope to see him go back. He's still a great fighter."
No, he isn't.
And he hasn't been in a long time. At the very least, he was a decent fighter, not a great fighter.
We found out in 2019 when he lost to a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao that Keith is not a great fighter.
Great fighters don't drop the torch in what was a passing of the torch fight. Keith's career died on the vine a long time ago.
It did.
If he's frustrated with Terence, it's because he's ready to cash out. He's ready to fight in one more big fight than bow out from the sport, but no one, not even Terence, wants to give him the time of day.
Tough break, kid.